Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be free? Is it just about not being in chains? Or is it something more? Today, we re-diving into the early life of a man who spent 27 years in prison to answer that very question for his people. The incredible Nelson Mandela, through his own words, in Long Walk to Freedom. Before he was a global icon, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was a boy born in the small village of Imvezo in the eastern Cape of South Africa. His father was a respected local chief, and from him, Mandela inherited a proud spirit and a strong sense of justice. He describes his childhood as simple but idyllic, spent herding cattle, playing with other boys, and listening to the elders tell stories of his ancestors, tales of a time before the white man came. These early years were crucial. They instilled in him a deep connection to his Xhosa heritage and the land. He learned about community, leadership, and responsibility, not from books, but from the rhythm of village life. It was a world of tradition, respect, and a clear social order. But this peaceful existence was just the calm before the storm. His life took a sharp turn when his father passed away. Mandela, only 9 years old, was sent to live with the Vembu regent, Chief Jongathabedilinjabo, at the Great Place in Makekazweni. This was essentially the royal court of the Vembu people. Suddenly, the country boy was being groomed for a future of influence. He received a formal British-style education, a privilege few black children had at the time. He learned English, wore Western clothes, and was taught history from a European perspective. This created a fascinating contrast within him. On one hand, he was deeply rooted in his African identity. On the other, he was being shaped by the very culture that was oppressing his people. He witnessed firsthand the subtle and not so subtle ways the colonial system worked. Even in the regent's court, where African tradition was strong, the authority of the white magistrate was absolute. As a young man, Mandela's rebellious spirit began to show. He attended Fort Hare University, a premier institution for black students in southern Africa. It was here that his political consciousness truly began to awaken. He met other bright, ambitious young Africans, including Oliver Tambo, who would become later his lifelong friend and partner in the struggle. At Fort Hare, he got his first taste of student activism, protesting against the university's policies and eventually being suspended for it. To escape an arranged marriage set up by the regent, Mandela and his cousin Justice did something unthinkable. They ran away. They fled to the bustling, vibrant, and dangerous city of Johannesburg. This was a whole new world. The gold mines, the crowded townships, the stark inequality. It was the heart of the apartheid system in its rawest form. In Johannesburg, he experienced the daily humiliations of being a black man under apartheid. The past laws, the segregation, the constant threat of police harassment. He worked as a mine security officer and later as a law clerk, all while studying to complete his degree. It was during this time that he met Walter Sisulu, another pivotal figure who became his mentor. Sisulu saw the potential in Mandela and welcomed him into the African National Congress, the ANC. This is where the young man from the countryside begins his transformation into a freedom fighter. He was no longer just observing injustice. He was preparing to fight it. He, along with Oliver Tambo and Walter Sisulu, formed the ANC Youth League. They were tired of the older generation's cautious approach. They believed in a more radical, confrontational program of action. They wanted freedom, and they wanted it now. So, this first part of his journey takes us from a peaceful rural childhood to the heart of the political struggle in Johannesburg. It shows us the making of the man, a product of two worlds, African tradition and Western education, who chose to dedicate his life to dismantling the oppressive system he was born into. His long walk had just begun. The 1960 Sharpeville massacre was a brutal turning point. Peaceful protesters were gunned down, and in response, the government banned the ANC and other liberation movements. For Mandela and his comrades, this was the final straw. The path of nonviolence had reached a dead end, blocked by state-sanctioned violence. They realized that they couldn't just stand by while their people were being oppressed and killed. It was a heavy, somber decision, but they felt they had no other choice. They formed Umkhonto we Sizwe, or Spear the Nation, the armed wing of the ANC. Mandela went underground, becoming a master of disguise, earning him the nickname the Black Pimpernel. He traveled across Africa and even to Europe, seeking support and military training for his new organization. He was living the life of a revolutionary, constantly on the move, separated from his family, his wife Winnie, and his children. He describes the immense personal sacrifice. This required the constant fear of capture, and the loneliness of the fight. This wasn't about a love for violence. It was a strategic shift, a reluctant but necessary response to an enemy that only understood the language of force. Their initial targets were strategic infrastructure power plants, transportation links aiming to disrupt the apartheid economy without causing loss of life. But the state's net was closing in. In 1962, Mandela was arrested. This led to the infamous Rivonia trial, where he and his fellow leaders were charged with sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. They faced the death penalty. It was during this trial that Mandela delivered one of the most powerful speeches of the 20th century. Standing in the dock, he looked his accusers in the eye and laid out the reasons for their struggle. He ended with words that would echo around the world. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. His words were electrifying, but the verdict was grim. Mandela and his comrades were spared the death penalty, but they were sentenced to life in prison. He was sent to the notorious Robben Island, a barren rock in the middle of the cold Atlantic. This wasn't just a prison. It was a place designed to break the human spirit. The inmates endured hard labor in a limestone quarry, meager rations, and constant humiliation from the guards. Yet, even in this hellish place, the struggle continued. Mandela writes about how the prison became a university. The political prisoners organized classes, debated strategy, and educated each other. They maintained their discipline and their dignity in the face of relentless attempts to dehumanize them. Mandela became a leader even within the prison walls, a focal point of resistance who negotiated with the authorities on behalf of his fellow prisoners. He learned to Afrikaans, the language of the oppressor, to better understand them and to communicate directly. He never let them see him broken. This period shows his incredible resilience and his unwavering belief that even from a prison cell, he could continue the long walk to freedom. Now we will see how he not only survived but emerged from prison to lead his nation out of the darkness of apartheid. And now, in this last section, we witness the culmination of a lifelong struggle and the birth of a new nation. After 27 years of imprisonment, Mandela is finally released in 1990. Can you even imagine that moment, walking out of Victor Verster prison, hand in hand with Winnie Mandela, not as a broken man, but as a global symbol of resistance and hope? The world watched, holding its breath, but his walk to freedom was far from over. In fact, the most challenging part had just begun. The country was a tinderbox, teetering on the brink of civil war. Decades of apartheid had left deep, festering wounds of racial hatred and inequality. Mandela's immediate task was monumental: to negotiate a peaceful transition to a democratic, non-racial South Africa. He engaged in intense, often fraught, negotiations with President F.W. de Klerk's government. These weren't simple talks. They were a high-stakes chess game for the future of a nation, with violence constantly threatening to derail the process. Mandela's genius here was his ability to balance strength with reconciliation. He had to reassure the fearful white minority while simultaneously meeting the urgent and long overdue demands of the oppressed black majority. He navigated this treacherous path with incredible grace and strategic brilliance. He preached forgiveness when many cried out for vengeance, showing a level of magnanimity that is almost superhuman. He understood that true freedom couldn't be built on a foundation of revenge. He famously said, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." Then came the historic day, April 27, 1994, South Africa's first ever multiracial democratic election. For the first time in their lives, millions of black South Africans could vote. Mandela describes the long, snaking queues of people waiting patiently for hours, sometimes days, to cast their ballot. It was a deeply emotional, powerful moment of collective liberation. And then the result: Nelson Mandela was elected as the first black president of South Africa. The inauguration was a spectacle of unity, with world leaders and former enemies standing together to celebrate the Rainbow Nation. As president, Mandela worked tirelessly to dismantle the structures of apartheid and build a new, inclusive society. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a groundbreaking and controversial initiative. It wasn't about punishing perpetrators, but about uncovering the truth of past atrocities, allowing victims to share their stories and perpetrators to request amnesty in exchange for full disclosure. It was a painful, necessary process designed to heal the nation's soul, not through retribution, but through shared understanding. But the book ends on a profound and somewhat somber note. Mandela reflects that even with this monumental victory, the journey is not over. He writes that he has discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. He had achieved political freedom, but he knew that true freedom also meant being free from poverty, inequality, and discrimination. The long walk, he realized, continues. It's a collective journey for all of us. His story is not just the tale of one man's life. It is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and an enduring call to action for justice and equality everywhere. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of Long Walk to Freedom. I hope it's inspired you to pick up this essential book. If you enjoyed this series, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.